Sender Nani Nanzer La Kyo, Naxervomo, Yan Jivsha, Juzo, Dergen Timbirang, Zuxian, the Nazompo Yondon Shivi, Ternzuki Dabo, Rigdi George, Mapum, Lutun, Tremeda, German Yanwi Pamo, Division the Jishi. There's no danger, Manam Stavi Chu, Stavi Chula, Nimson Vermed Jimba, Nyamtak and Joey. Ton me de Shavjang Mambo, year the Sherze, Kyo Nyaulam Mungagrawan Mapshon.
I've recited the transmission of 2 verses. In this way, I will introduce it to everyone while reciting the transmission. Today, what we have here is a doha composed by His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche. It is a doha that is about the importance of renouncing our present worldly life. The title of this song is Cuckoo's Melody, Song of Renunciation. Now, regarding the cuckoo mentioned in the title, in Tibetan area, we often have many of these cuckoo birds. These creatures arrive during the spring season, specifically toward the end of spring. Then, throughout the 3 months of summer, they proceed to bring everyone the gift of their especially beautiful songs. Once the autumn season arrives, they fly directly on their journey to the south. This entire migratory pattern is what we refer to as Mengdi. Some people say Mengdi is Bhutan, others say it is the south. In any event, on the high-altitude Tibetan plateau, when the weather inevitably begins to get much colder, they are left with no other choice but to leave the area. Now, some Dharma friends at Larunga, they are also quite similar to cuckoos. They make their way up here during the summer season. Then, when winter arrives, they make the journey back down. It's possible this is because they are unable to withstand the colder weather. It's a beautiful song for the whole. I don't know how it is among other ethnic groups and regions. I'm not too sure, but regarding Tibetan area, it's a common hope that it will arrive soon. It is generally believed that after its arrival, many of the harms, various sufferings, and the declines we see in the world will be greatly reduced and naturally disappear. When this moment finally arrives, it brings with it a beautiful song that resonates deeply with everyone, giving people a truly genuine sense of renewed hope and a profound spiritual awakening. For this reason, in some of our most cherished folk traditions, when spring comes, we are always waiting for it with a sense of anticipation. After it arrives, there is a feeling that many difficult problems are much more easily solved. It is therefore seen as a very good sign, and this belief has become a kind of established custom. This is precisely why the precious Guru used its unique song to help explain the profound Song of Renunciation. Why did he put it this way? Because in fact, the Song of Renunciation, some of us might think, why exactly does Buddhism place such special emphasis on the concept of suffering? Why does it advocate renouncing the world? Isn't the world so very beautiful and so absolutely full of joy? So then, why exactly should we feel the need to reject it and completely abandon it? For some people, this could be perceived as a rather negative or even an overly dogmatic way of thinking. There may be people who think this way, but if you truly understand Buddhist thought, you'll realize that so-called world weariness does not mean completely denying all the beauty that once existed. It's not about erasing everything. That's not what it means. Rather, it is fundamentally about helping us truly understand the complex reality of the world. This is because so many people in this world, in fact, treat things that are present yet lack inherent existence, like dreams or illusions. They view these things as if they were truly real and undeniably substantial. Consequently, in order to pursue and ultimately obtain them, they are willing to pay a great price. In the end, after all this effort, they inevitably become both physically and mentally exhausted. This kind of situation does happen. Therefore, it is to help us truly realize the central idea is that worldly attachments, in a certain sense, are completely illusory. It allows us to understand, and once we understand, to transcend this world and ultimately attain the most meaningful and subtle kind of liberation. So here we have this particular piece called the Song of Renunciation. As we have discussed before, among the eminent monks and great masters in Han region, there are works like the Song of Awakening, Song to Awaken the World, and Song of Renunciation, among others. Among the eminent monks and great masters of India, there are also many songs that express a sense of renunciation toward the world. We will also come to understand this as we analyze further below. If it is an ordinary worldly person, for example, after becoming weary of this world, they may become hopeless and disappointed, and in the end might choose suicide or jumping off a building, or make many other unwise choices. But in Buddhism, after developing renunciation toward the world, They actively seek a higher and better kind of liberation, one that is more profound. Consequently, they view this world and their place in it with a deep and transformative sense of inner awakening. It's not that I simply can't stand this world right now, and after becoming disillusioned with the world, I completely lose all confidence in it to the point where I can't even go on living. In fact, that's not the case. For example, some of us who have become monastics, truly outstanding monastics, have already developed a sense of aversion toward the world. If they develop such an aversion, they find their own life goal through another level of spiritual awakening. They discover their own purpose in life. It is not fundamentally because they are incapable of surviving in this particular world that they have no choice but to become monastics, suffering greatly, and just continue on in a very bored and meaningless way. That is not what a true monastic is. Are there such people among monastics? Perhaps there are, but that is not the true purpose of Buddhism. So it is true that some of us may have certain misunderstandings about Buddhism and some misconceptions as well. Why is that? Because of developing aversion. This world is actually so wonderful, so we shouldn't develop aversion toward it. But in fact, as we analyze further below, we will also come to understand this is to say that there are some fundamental truths that are genuinely worth our effort to understand. Next, let's begin our discussion on the Doha from the Precious Guru. This particular Doha is composed of 37 verses in its entirety, and for our session today, we plan to carefully cover approximately 11 or 12 of them. Then we will finish the rest in 3 sessions. First of all, the wisdom aspect of all Buddhas manifests as the Guru, the master of all qualities of retention, eloquence, and virtue, the lord of the family, the pure and wise Mipham Rinpoche, who abides joyfully, inseparable from the lotus in my heart. Here it is said that in the works of His Holiness, the precious Guru, almost every single work begins with a verse of homage to Guru Mipham Rinpoche. You will find there is always a verse of homage dedicated to him. In the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, as well as in many Indian traditions, as is customary in Buddhist traditions, we pay homage to our own Guru, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There is a tradition of first offering homage. As for the meaning of the homage verse, it refers to the wisdom aspect of all Buddhas of the 3 times, which manifests itself as a tangible physical form, specifically appearing to us as the Guru. This physical body, therefore, is in fact the living embodiment of the entire collective wisdom of all the Buddhas, transformed into a physical form. In other words, the physical form of Mipham Rinpoche in his time, he possessed the qualities of total retention, never forgetting the dharani, as well as boundless qualities such as unobstructed speech, unobstructed dharma, unobstructed wisdom, and so on. He is the supreme master of the great treasury, which holds the 4 distinct kinds of unobstructed eloquence. This is praise for his mastery of speech. As for his great wisdom, it is a well-established fact that he truly embodies both the peaceful and the wrathful aspects, and he is, without a doubt, the primary enlightened one among all of the 100 deities. Such an incredibly pure and wise Mipham Rinpoche should never be separated from me. May he always joyfully abide within the sacred lotus of my heart forever. This is the essential meaning being conveyed in this prayer. In other words, it is a heartfelt prayer to one's root guru. This practice is also considered to be a profound form of guru yoga. This is a heartfelt prayer offered to the guru, and that is the very reason why we say the guru, in essence, never truly leaves us. This is a subject we often talk about, isn't that right? Even though his physical form is no longer with us. Some of us think the Guru is no longer by our side, the Guru has already passed away, the Guru has seemingly gone somewhere else, we can't see him, can't hear him, and so on and so forth. But in fact, if you genuinely and truly have complete faith in the Guru, there is absolutely no difference from having the Guru physically right by your side. Jigme Pansok Rinpoche, he and Mipham Rinpoche, they never really interacted with each other, not in the way that ordinary people do. They never met. You see, at the very moment when His Holiness Rinpoche was born, he came into this world in 1933. Mipham Rinpoche had already left this world in 1912. So you see, there was such a long gap in between. But because his transcendent wisdom body had already embraced him, because his own profound wisdom had merged into the great His Holiness. So from a young age, His Holiness, as it is mentioned in the teachings, probably around the age of 3 or 4, had an extraordinary faith in Mipham Rinpoche. He had a unique faith in him. This was a very special and quite profound karmic connection. In this particular kind of situation, some of us might find that because your teacher, perhaps his profound wisdom and all the many different aspects of his teachings, have been especially beneficial to you. As a result, maybe in this lifetime, it's possible you might not actually encounter the genuine teacher, or perhaps the teacher you consider your guru has already departed from this world. Look at us today. As we discuss the teachings of His Holiness, I think that among those of us attending this class today, more or less everyone has at least heard the name of His Holiness. But I believe that among those listening today, perhaps approximately 80% of common people have never personally met His Holiness in person. Many people have literally never seen Him. You might certainly feel, do I not have a karmic connection with the Guru? I haven't even met him, but actually that's not the case. If you have received some of his teachings or the lineage from his disciples, if you have obtained these, then in fact you do have a connection. Take, for example, the Venerable Jigme Lingpa, who never met the Venerable Longchenpa in person, yet all of Longchenpa's wisdom had already merged into Jigme Lingpa. Later on, he became such a truly great and widely respected propagator of the profound Vajrayana teachings, in other words, a great awakened being. So I think, including all of us now, in this era, when the internet is especially developed, for those gurus who frequently bestow the blessings of the Dharma upon you, perhaps in this lifetime you may not necessarily be able to meet them in person. However, this is actually not all that important. So what is truly even more important? It is the opportunity to receive the profound wisdom of the Guru. So I think that as for the great wish fulfilling His Holiness through his prayers to Mifam Rinpoche, indirectly we can also truly come to understand that our root Guru may not necessarily be physically present by your side. We also know that the Guru's wisdom can still be received. Why am I talking about the Guru's teachings this time? Some of us have never met the Guru at all, including some of the Khenpos and Khenmos at Larung Ga now, these new Khenpos and Khenmos, and some Dharma teachers who are especially well versed in the exoteric and esoteric traditions. I often ask, have you ever met His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche? No. At that time, I hadn't even taken refuge yet. I was still immersed in samsara, as if I'm not already in samsara right now. No, not immersed in samsara. I was caught up in the 8 worldly concerns. No, it wasn't merely the 8 worldly concerns that I found myself immersed in. In retrospect, it seems that some of us might have been deeply immersed in the endless cycle of samsara at that time, thoroughly caught up in those 8 worldly concerns and, in fact, all sorts of other worldly trivialities, in a state of ignorance and delusion, without having any true faith, and so on. But now we are truly fortunate enough to be able to study together with the profound wisdom of the Guru. I also think that if we study the Guru's teachings, it's actually not fundamentally different from meeting the Guru in person. In fact, the Guru's teachings should, I saw in the colophon, which is the publisher's note that you'll typically find at the very end of the book. This piece was actually composed during a very specific time, which was the year of the dragon. So, if I'm calculating correctly, that particular year should correspond to 1964. And at that point in time, I was personally just a very young child, only 2 years old. Back then, in the region of Tibetan area, there should have been a great many of them. However, the overall situation in Tibetan area was not a good one at all, because there had just been a famine before that, and then came the democratic reforms, after which Buddhism suffered especially severe damage. It was not long after this that the period known as the Cultural Revolution officially began. In those years, as we can see in the following text, it is also apparent. Sometimes, by carefully following the Guru's teachings, we can follow history, and what's more, it also includes the Guru's own personal life stories. Beyond the wisdom they impart, we can also draw inspiration from the Guru's example of genuine compassion, actively cultivating this selfless quality within ourselves as a truly essential part of our spiritual journey, and carefully trace every single step of the Guru's path. There are such possibilities. So we can take a look at this here. At that time, His Holiness, the wish-fulfilling jewel, I see that in 1964, he was probably in his early 30s, about 32 or 33. His Holiness was born in 1933, after all. At that particular time, His Holiness was still very young. In all the Guru's previous works, he always paid homage to his teachers. Later on in his life, when the Guru was approaching parinirvana, he still continued to have truly immense faith in the great master Mifam Rinpoche. Unlike some of us, who were especially close to a certain Guru last year, but this year, it appears they have now completely and without a doubt turned into bitter enemies. And then, after another year, it's yet another Guru. During the entire course of one's life, the specific yidam and the revered Guru to whom one pays homage are in a state of being constantly changed and updated, very much like how one changes their clothes from day to day. Perhaps for him, this should be considered a unique kind of art, an expressive art form that is born from faith. And so, it is in this context that His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche gave the instruction not to part. Earlier, didn't we have a teaching from His Holiness called not to part? Later on, I recently translated some scattered teachings of His Holiness called Always Remembering. This year, during Larunga's Vajrasattva assembly, we have distributed to everyone the collection containing the 70 teachings of His Holiness. This collection is considered to be quite representative, as it contains a total of 71 distinct points for study. This is significant because this year marks the 13th anniversary, and to reflect this, the book has been structured into 13 main chapters. And on a smaller scale, there are 71 sections. The number 71 represents His Holiness living to the age of 71. I named this work Always Remembering. The Guru must never be forgotten, never to be parted from. This is our approach. At that time, His Holiness said that Mipham Rinpoche would never be apart. He should reside in my heart. There is no need for him to be by my side anymore, by my pillow, or wherever else. If he had to be somewhere physically, that would be a bit difficult. But if he resides in my heart, then wherever my heart goes, it's possible. Even when sleeping at night, your heart is close to you. After all, your heart is inside your own body, right? So, you see, not being apart and always keeping him close in your heart is a very, very good thing. However, if he leaves your heart, then that's not so good. So I think always remembering, it also means not forgetting in your heart. There are two ways of not forgetting in your heart, but we'll talk about that later. We can't go too broad, otherwise we won't be able to finish the content later. I often start off too broadly at the beginning, and then end up rushing through the transmission at the end. The happiness of this life is, in truth, like a fleeting dream, and both day and night, poor pitiable beings are so very attached to it. Trivial matters appear in my mind, and I can't help but sing a song of renunciation. Next, let's continue. Now, regarding the happiness that we can find in this life, in actual fact, it is very much like the happiness that is typically experienced within a dream. The happiness we pursue and obtain in this life is exactly the same as the happiness in a dream. But so many sentient beings in this world have no idea at all. Day and night, they are so very attached to their own happiness. It is truly, truly pitiable. The actions taken by such truly deplorable beings, all their complicated and trivial matters, absolutely everything they are so deeply attached to and engage in each and every single day. When I think of all these things right now, deep down in my heart, by I mean His Holiness, the precious author, it's in his heart, seeing these pitiable beings pursuing worldly happiness, something as dreamlike and lacking any inherent nature as this, and being so deeply immersed in it, so utterly attached to it. From my own experience, I truly feel there is a special necessity to sing a song of renunciation. Using a song like this helps to make it perfectly clear to everyone regarding all these various worldly phenomena. After all, we are simply people of the world. It's quite impossible for us not to eat or drink. It's certainly impossible not to earn money. It's definitely impossible for us not to work. All of the important things that absolutely need to be done since we've come into this world, some things that must be done, we have to do, but we shouldn't be too attached. If we become overly obsessed with our thoughts and overly attached to external things, it's possible that some of these things may not even be real. For us, living in this kind of delusion would be a truly loss. Therefore, to help us understand this principle, His Holiness uses a song of teachings to guide us. In fact, it's important to recognize that the author's worldview and the values they express should be viewed as distinct from our own personal standards of living. For instance, we may be especially attached to securing happiness in this life, and when we finally obtain it, we feel an immense and profound sense of joy. But when we lose it, we feel immense pain. Moreover, everyone regards happiness as something that is, in fact, genuinely and truly real, not only as something real, but also feels that everything they do themselves. This, without a doubt, truly has great significance. This is how we become attached. But as an awakened one, as an enlightened being, although they acknowledge that in this world, all worldly phenomena and their outward appearances, including everything we do, are fully recognized, and yet at the very same time, they do not become attached to any of them. They know that all of this will one day inevitably be destroyed. Just like all of these wonderful Dharma teachings that we have available right now, they are actually like bubbles in water. They are bound to burst and disappear. In the treatise on the ornament of the sutras, when discussing the four Dharma seals, it talks about impermanence. When it talks about impermanence, why is it considered suffering and why is it so impermanent? Because all conditioned phenomena in this world are ultimately impermanent. When they are impermanent, they are bound to bring suffering. Regarding this statement, I think some people feel, oh, the world is very joyful. Yes, the world is indeed very joyful right now. However, the happiness we are enjoying at this very moment is, in all actuality, something that is quite fleeting and can completely vanish in an instant. It will be completely destroyed in a very short time. It is critically important for us to be fully aware of this concept. So, with that point firmly established, we will now proceed to a detailed discussion concerning the two verses that immediately follow.
Chirtrim Jurian Zeku Nibo Mahto, Ranganямla Pambar Dirtsum Mengi, Zalan Dinner Yots Merchi La Wang, Tadon Chom Tadon Choshi Merti Rendo Tiang.
Just today, I actually received two new books. One of them is actually called Everything Is Not Fate, which is precisely the 22nd inspiring book in our established university speech series. The other is specifically called Happiness in an Age of Confusion. This is exactly the 21st book in the complete university speech series. You all seem so really very fake. Monastics from the Theravada tradition would certainly not, under any circumstances, act in such a manner as this. When we were at the World Youth Buddhist Symposium, it was indeed the very first time that people from the esteemed Chinese Han Buddhism and the revered Tibetan Buddhism, and then the monastics from the Theravada tradition, felt really quite annoyed indeed, very much just looking at us. There was an old, venerable and wise monk sitting right next to me. I wanted to act like this too, but I saw that he didn't move at all. So I simply pretended to do the same behavior. Sometimes you just have to pretend. There's another fascinating story after this one, but I regret to say that I cannot tell it now. Next, the third verse profoundly states, though the wealthy individuals are often envied by many people, their bodies and their minds only grow more restless and increasingly troubled. Even with the finest food and the most luxurious clothing, they simply cannot bear to part with them. At the very end of their lives, an intense greed arises and significantly hinders their liberation. Here, what it is clearly saying is that although many people are genuinely interested in the immense wealth and financial holdings of the rich, especially everyone is incredibly envious of the rich man's immense wealth. They constantly think about how much money he possesses. He owns such an extraordinarily luxurious and opulent villa, which further fuels their envy and admiration. Cars such as Mercedes-Benz, BMW, the high-end appliances he uses, and so on, are truly remarkable. They are particularly envious of his possessions and lifestyle. Of course, from a worldly and practical perspective, this abundance is also undeniably a great blessing for him, and that fact cannot be denied or overlooked. But on the other hand, as they become increasingly wealthier, their physical body and mental mind are subjected to boundless and relentless suffering. They have absolutely no time to truly rest, and absolutely no time for any meaningful leisure activities. There is a powerful and persistent force operating behind them, constantly pushing and compelling them to engage in all sorts of diverse activities and undertakings. In such challenging circumstances, some individuals who possess considerable wealth are even unwilling to use high-quality clothes and food for themselves, feeling quite reluctant to truly enjoy them. Some individuals are a bit better off, thanks to the abundant blessings from their past lives and their fortunate circumstances. They have wealth and possessions in every aspect. Whether it's precisely what they choose to wear or exactly what they prefer to eat, what they regularly use or precisely where they currently live, everything is really quite genuinely good. Some successful, dedicated people are doing particularly well in these respects, but some are still rather reluctant to use what they already have. In the end, when they are on their deathbed, what do all these possessions become? They become obstacles to their own liberation. Some of us might say, how could that be? The more money, the better. How could it become an obstacle at the end of life? But that's not necessarily the case. For example, some wealthy individuals, as they approach the end of their lives, often haven't properly arranged their extensive assets. They possess a multitude of luxury cars, grand houses, and various other significant possessions, and large amounts of savings. Logically speaking, when we reach the end of our lives, we might need to immediately make a vow to be reborn in the pure land of ultimate bliss. At the moment of death, all of one's mind should be directed toward letting go of attachments or making aspirations to be reborn in a pure land and so on. But at that time, if there is an even stronger attachment to wealth and possessions, in his profound state of deep reluctance to truly let go, he persistently remains fixated and utterly preoccupied with these material things. On the surface, it certainly does seem that an abundance of wealth, whether in modern times or in ancient times, is really quite practical for many people. People are especially eager to pursue it. People also envy those who are rich and have wealth. But those who possess wealth sometimes become arrogant themselves because of it. For the sake of this considerable wealth, they end up physically and mentally exhausted. Sometimes when we observe people who are especially wealthy on the surface, it certainly seems like these individuals should be very happy indeed. But in reality, they are always deeply worried and incredibly busy. And later, when they eventually leave this world, they often feel profoundly unfulfilled and regretful. Perhaps the thing they are most reluctant to part with is their money. But there is absolutely nothing at all they can effectively do about this particular situation. So, when it comes to the concept of worldly wealth, next, we will primarily and thoroughly analyze the various aspects of this material wealth, or in other words, we will thoroughly discuss wealth itself, because Buddhism, from its very inception, consistently advocates for contentment and diligently reducing desires, and strongly encourages not being overly greedy for material wealth. Within this specific ideological context, that is precisely what we are discussing here. Of course, some of us are lay practitioners. Most of those attending today's lecture are lay Buddhists. As lay practitioners, when learning about Buddhism, we absolutely shouldn't fall into extremes. Extremes are truly not good. For example, thinking, oh, I'm a Buddhist now, so I don't need to do anything anymore. Not even the fundamental basics of living or earning money. If you don't do any of these things, in this modern day and age, where the competition is incredibly fierce and intense, and the relentless pace of life is exceptionally fast and demanding at such a crucial and challenging time, we really must consider our approach. We find that even devout Buddhists have trouble meeting their most basic needs. So, the essential things we ought to do, we should still diligently do. However, if you become excessively greedy and overly focused on accumulating material wealth, it will become an obstacle to your liberation. At this point, we also have to carefully reflect on this matter. Some people who practice well, in fact, all those individuals who practiced well before they truly encountered Buddhism, seem to genuinely feel that the more wealth they accumulated, the better it would be. But after taking refuge in Buddhism and beginning to practice, they started to use their own wisdom and insight to observe their own actions and their behavior. Actually, this is a very good and positive thing. We should use our profound wisdom to observe the vast wealth of this world. So, what does it truly say next? No matter how incredibly wealthy you are, it is ultimately only for basic food and essential clothing. For oneself, there is not even a tiny speck of genuine benefit to one's own spiritual realization. Even if a person possesses all the wealth of Jambudvipa, they are still not satisfied, and their desires increase. Here, for instance, some people are truly exceptionally wealthy, those who possess very immense riches. But in reality, when it comes time to use it, apart from themselves, their family and close relatives, they only use it for things like food, clothing, and daily living. For the essential activities of eating, living, and dressing, aside from these fundamental necessities, it seems there's nothing else they can really truly use it for. There isn't even the slightest real, tangible benefit to themselves at all. Of course, if they do some charity or accumulate merit, then there is some benefit. But here, from the important and profound perspective of authentic spiritual practice and personal awakening, from the wise perspective of modern views on wealth, if wealth and money keep constantly increasing, it's really just for our own simple, essential living material needs. Beyond that, there's really no other practical way to use it. Even if someone possessed all the immense wealth in the entire world, all the riches of Jambudvipa, all the wealth in the world, perhaps this person would still be insatiable and not content. Their desires might just continue to grow and expand. In this particular way, it's actually quite challenging to truly satisfy ourselves with material wealth. At a certain point, we should use our own mind to find satisfaction. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to achieve our objectives. It seems that the businessman Li Ka-shing once stated as well. He said, "So-called material wealth does not necessarily bring us true and lasting satisfaction. If one's personal wealth keeps steadily increasing, perhaps their sense of insecurity also significantly grows." He said, "It's very possible that wealthy people also want to compare themselves to Bill Gates. But if you compare yourself to Bill Gates, maybe in our current reality, it would be very distressing, always feeling inferior to him. Even if you already have his incredible level of massive wealth, there is still a deep sense of constant crisis, a persistent feeling of profound insecurity. A famous reporter once directly asked Jack Ma, he said, "What is your current sense of happiness truly like now?" He thoughtfully replied, "My present and current sense of happiness. It is truly like being at a very high altitude of 7,000 meters indeed, feeling the effects of high-altitude hypoxia. You see, here we are at 4,000 meters," he said, 7,000 meters, which means a place 7,000 meters high, so the lack of oxygen would be even more severe. We think that many wealthy people nowadays, like Jack Ma, when you see how much he earns in a single day, you might think, wow, he must be so happy. He must be really joyful. Most people in the world probably think he is especially happy. But as your wealth increases, actually, even truly wealthy people, at most, they just eat a little better, dress a little better, drive a nice car, live in a slightly better house. Other than that, no matter how much you try to spend, there's nothing more you can do. Not just him, actually, all of those around him. Even if the people connected to him try to spend it, there's no way. So sometimes when it comes to wealth, if too much of it is concentrated in one person, maybe he still feels unsatisfied inside. He still wants to do all kinds of different things, still wants to accumulate a significant amount of wealth, and still wants to manage his personal finances in various and diverse ways. The other day, I was at a school and I was asked, "Do you monks actually manage your finances in any capacity or in any way?" Nowadays, for students, and indeed for people throughout the entire world, this is a particularly and profoundly important topic. Many of the dedicated Buddhists residing on our mountain don't really understand these things. The other day, I also talked to some of the Dharma teachers who went out with us. I said, you should try to understand more about the mindset of worldly people. What are people in the world concerned about these days? What exactly are we truly concerned about? If we don't fully understand what worldly people value most, then even if we talk about Buddhism, sometimes it might not really deeply touch their innermost hearts. Because all the values of worldly people, all the hearts of people, when they are already focused on a certain point, if we talk about some Buddhist principles on the side, it might not necessarily work either. So for someone to truly understand the awakening of life, the first thing is to know their mindset. Only then can we prescribe the right remedy for the situation. Some individuals are indeed, at this very moment, particularly excessively preoccupied with and actively seeking financial gain and interpersonal connections, along with various other fleeting illusions in this transient existence. At this time, we also become especially interested in this regard and feel a particular sense of responsibility. We deeply think that even a basic, simple, single, fundamental principle from traditional Buddhism might be incredibly meaningful for their whole daily life. So when it comes to temporary, tangible, external worldly wealth, no matter how much there is, in reality, apart from meeting one's basic needs for food, clothing, shelter, and transportation, it really doesn't bring any other benefits. The wealthy people in our world, perhaps as their financial wealth significantly and really increases, their desires also grow stronger and stronger, just like drinking salt water, which only serves to intensify their thirst and leaves them feeling unfulfilled. In the end, they often leave this world with a sense of dissatisfaction or an insatiable, ever-growing greed. Next, what are we going to discuss? It's also deeply related to the complex concept of wealth. In this particular part, His Holiness previously talked a lot about wealth in great detail and at length. Though terribly poor and harshly ridiculed by many individuals, one should deeply consider the hidden suffering endured by the wealthy rich. A difficult lifetime spent seeking and hoarding wealth brings tremendous misery, while beggars sleep peacefully and at ease. Here it states that although people feel especially poor, the true nature of suffering can be found. I didn't recite the Tibetan, did I? You all keep looking so intently at me. Did I perhaps recite it incorrectly or wrongly?
Normang Janlam Jong Answer to Samse, Stinyer Rang La Wamshir Strongbo Rang Tinim, a Yarki Meto Dodon Shigboy Jenner, Tartam Zimzi and Jayang Nampugna Tabaka, Shnyangbo Me La Hajan Jimbayang Chena, Zoka Anju Yangsala, yang lan zhong gu ji men nam zhong gu ji men nam.
So it states that although it is ingrained in people's common habits and societal tendencies, when the discussion turns to individuals who are considered poor or those who possess a lowly social status, nearly everyone tends to mock them or to look down upon them with disdain, or even to actively belittle and ridicule them with harsh words and actions. This is a very common habit that many people share. However, sometimes when we truly consider some of the incredibly wealthy individuals, we can see the profound suffering and immense burdens they often endure day and night, that is to say, throughout their entire lives. First, they work painstakingly hard to seek financial wealth, then they desperately accumulate personal property, and in the end, much of their money often ultimately ends up being completely destroyed, permanently lost, and so on. So in this case, there is the suffering of seeking wealth, the suffering of accumulating wealth, and the suffering of losing wealth. When we see these wealthy people suffering in relation to their wealth, actually, the simple carefree life of a poor beggar who sleeps deeply peacefully seems to have a real special kind of true happiness to it, as indeed. Sometimes we can also see this personally for ourselves. Wealthy, materialistic, rich people are always obsessively thinking about their wealth every day. How to make a fortune, how to earn more money, how to invest their money wisely, and so on. They continuously keep pondering these financial decisions, and as a result, they end up unable to sleep soundly night after night, plagued by worry. Beggars may seem very pitiful at first glance. Everyone mocks them, everyone looks down on them, but they sleep very soundly. When the sun rises, they are still snoring away, sleeping in the sunlight. He always sleeps very soundly, but many wealthy people might actually be regularly taking sleeping pills and living like this all the time. So sometimes when you carefully compare the two, you will actually notice most people tend to genuinely think that those individuals without sufficient money are very miserable indeed. I used to joke and often say, well, I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud. Wealthy people also have a lot of suffering, both the rich and the poor. There's a Russian novel that says, it tells a compelling story, which essentially goes like this. There was a terribly poor man and a proud, rich, powerful man. They made an unusual, challenging bet with each other. The rich man said, if you can really successfully live in my grand, luxurious house for even a full 10 years without really coming out, I bet you, that I will give you all of my considerable wealth. The poor man said, no problem at all. I will absolutely and without any hesitation stay here. Later, that poor man, absolutely delighted with this comfortable and secure place, as he had promised. He was illiterate at first. At the beginning, he practiced writing and learning characters. Then gradually, he started reading martial arts novels and also erotic novels. Later on, he delved into some other interesting things. Since the rich man's house probably had absolutely everything, he started reading history, profound religion, and world classics. After that, he diligently began to read extensively about spiritual cultivation. In the end, he successfully learned how to meditate. When he meditated, he felt especially comfortable and deeply relaxed. Time passed by very quickly. He began to spend years in seclusion, practicing like a hermit. When the 10 years were almost up, on the very last night, just before the full 10 years were completely over, the rich man thoughtfully considered, after this night indeed, all of my considerable wealth will undoubtedly belong to the poor man. So I should find a way to kill him. Otherwise, it just simply wouldn't make any sense at all. So he deliberately took a sharp knife and quietly went to the specific room where the man was currently staying. But when he finally got there, he quickly found that the man was already completely gone. He had left a short note. What exactly did it say? It said, I am especially and truly deeply grateful. I also know that you are coming to kill me tonight. I know I used to be very foolish. I was a person without any education at all. But through your truly insightful method, I have now become completely aware. I have indeed profoundly awakened. So now I no longer need your kind of wealth. I have acquired even greater wealth now, and I truly do not seek yours anymore at all. As for this kind of worldly wealth, therefore it is of no use to me anymore at all. So I have now left this place. Thank you very much for everything. He had awakened and quietly left the premises. This particular story is quite interesting, isn't it? What we refer to as wealth and poverty are merely and fundamentally about external things, specifically financial wealth, readily available money, and various material possessions. That's how people in the world are. No matter how much inner cultivation, profound wisdom, or deep compassion someone possesses, including a truly vast amount of worldly knowledge and understanding, we might not necessarily consider them to be genuinely wealthy. But in essence,
Authentic, true, lasting wealth is when your beautiful heart is completely rich. If you simply lack tangible material wealth on the exterior, it's actually not such a great suffering. If our hearts are especially empty and impoverished, therefore, even if an individual is surrounded by an abundance of money, they should not be considered genuinely wealthy in the deepest sense. This is how many people in the world tend to perceive things. As long as someone possesses a significant amount of money on the exterior, they are regarded as being extraordinarily rich and prosperous. And everyone truly thinks that's especially wonderful and quite remarkable. They genuinely perceive it that way. However, if we take a moment to deeply consider and reflect upon it, sometimes it is a common observation that people tend to ridicule or look down upon individuals who are beggars. However, if a beggar possesses a relatively good mindset, of course, it is also true that there are many beggars who suffer greatly. But personally, from what I actually see, most homeless poor beggars aren't truly in that much intense pain. There are some like that, but those suffering people aren't here. Some genuinely content beggars are probably far more considerably happier than wealthy people who are suffering.
Nowadays, in Western countries, there are indeed many so-called freelancers. There are also many homeless beggars. Some people specifically try to find jobs for them, specifically arrange for them to do simple tasks like washing dishes or cooking, but they are unwilling to do it. They feel it's restrictive and not good. They'd rather continue living their free life. Their so-called freedom means wandering everywhere, eating whenever they truly desire, sleeping whenever they wish, and freely roaming around their environment. They feel this is a very happy life. So sometimes we humans tend to look at others from our own perspective, which can potentially lead to vastly different and varied outcomes. If we always use our own personal values to define others and then place them into this particular kind of life, actually, that's not reasonable either. For example, some monastics completely believe that their way of life is, mine is the best, yours is not good. Some lay people, on the other hand, say, you became a monk, how do you live? You must be so miserable. But actually, everyone should have their own way of living happily. This is also very important. Also, for example, among people, say two monastics, maybe one likes to read books, one likes to chant mantras, and another likes to practice meditation. There isn't necessarily just one single model. If there were only one model, that would also be difficult because our habits are different, our lifestyles are different, and the origins of our past lives are different. So there are still some significant differences. Now, what exactly does it say next? It says, the immense wealth of the rich is truly like beautiful summer flowers. It appears incredibly beautiful and vibrant, but it is very, very hard to truly last and endure. If one becomes overly attached to such insubstantial worldly wealth, if you are too greedy and cling to it, then you will inevitably have to wander and drift aimlessly into the truly unbearable realms of hell, hungry ghosts and suffering animals, falling into the terrifying and perilous dangers of samsara, the cycle of existence. Here, it is also talking about wealth. What are colorful summer flowers like? Everyone clearly knows this. At that time, they are especially enchanting, especially beautiful. But when the harsh autumn winds arrive, all the flowers will wither away completely. They will all be swept away without a trace. It is impossible for them to remain in this world any longer. Patrul Rinpoche also mentions in The Words of My Perfect Teacher that the beautiful heavenly-like flowers and gardens of summer, so lovely, when winter truly arrives, not even a single delicate petal can indeed be found anywhere. Even if you search on horseback, you won't find any. Of course, at that time, Patrul Rinpoche was in the area of Shinchu. Shinchu is especially cold, even colder than our Sartar. Many metaphors in Patrul Rinpoche's The Words of My Perfect Teacher are inspired by the living conditions of that time. So the vibrant and beautiful flowers of summer may indeed look especially wonderful and truly captivating, but they unfortunately cannot last for a very long time. In precisely the same way, some of the wealth and riches in this material world may seem especially truly enviable on the outer surface, making many greedy, ambitious people want to pursue, praise, and admire them. But in harsh reality, when the right conditions are not present, they can disappear in a very short time. If we become overly attached and greedy for them, and commit all sorts of negative actions and deeds for the sake of wealth, especially some very wealthy people, they themselves may also commit many negative deeds themselves. Nowadays, some wealthy people among us when they traveled or went abroad at that specific particular moment in time, everything they ate was alive. I have met some truly wealthy and affluent people whose standards of living are extremely high. They exclusively consume live seafood, fresh monkey brains, and a wide variety of rare and incredibly expensive culinary delicacies, including some truly horrifying and unsettling dishes, among other exotic fare. They have already gotten used to it and feel they can't live without it. Right now, at this very moment, you may indeed show off and feel very prestigious, but when you eventually die, it could be a truly very tragic experience for you. Because of the negative karma created by your wealth, it could be even more terrifying. Especially nowadays, some very wealthy people who are, for example, those individuals who open factories or sell certain products, the various things that they indeed do and undertake may cost the lives of thousands, even countless sentient beings. And they actually pay for it in this very particular way. So after their own death, in this life, thousands upon thousands of people may envy them. But in the next life, who knows how many years they will burn in hell. This is also an especially terrifying thing. Therefore, while we are just alive, we should try our very best to, especially if we have some good fortune or a bit of wealth, or hold a certain status, to treat the people around us and the work we do by making every effort not to make a living through wrongful means, and to genuinely care for all those individuals around us with profound compassion and understanding as much as humanly possible. The 7th verse of the scripture explicitly states and says, "The ancients freely enjoyed the wealth of the 4 great continents, as well as their youthful vitality, profound happiness, and undeniable beauty. The exquisite clothes they wore were also exceptionally expensive." Just like the heavenly beings, like Brahma or Indra, their wealth and blessings were completely comparable to those of the gods. And the appearance of such wealthy people in every aspect was especially enviable to others. But they too are impermanent, just like a rainbow disappearing in the summer sky. So the fleeting enjoyments we have currently now are no different from fragile dewdrops on the tip of grass. The dewdrops on the tip of grass, when the morning sun appears, all of them are completely gone. They disappear in an instant. Therefore, we can look at some ancient histories. When I personally visit various places, including those famous ones in historic Europe, such as magnificent Notre Dame de Paris, the renowned British Museum, and beautiful countries like the charming Netherlands, Australia, and Italy, their territories, actually, in the past, they all had something special. For example, the famous Arch of Triumph of the Roman Empire, a remarkable and enduring symbol. I had heard some stories before, when I arrived there, those emperors and generals, their immense wealth at that time, their significant prestige at that time, everything they truly had back then, all of it, was truly something that people would be extremely, extremely envious of. But by today, all of it has, in some cases, turned into ruins, and in some cases makes people feel that everything is impermanent. So when we look at these things from the ancients, whether it's their especially marvelous and abundant wealth or their captivating appearance, we are often struck by the grandeur and splendor of their achievements and their very being. There truly isn't really anything to be particularly envious of. We should be definitely able to clearly observe this through recorded history. You could certainly put it this simple way. The ancient wealth and high status of the old ancients, if you carefully compare it to the modern wealth and status of today, there are also many people nowadays who are extremely wealthy. But this wealth, after a few years, 10 years or 100 years, what will it become? Every one of us should cultivate a profound sense of the inherent impermanence of all things. Reflecting on history back then, the formidable Emperor Qin Shi Huang successfully unified the 6 warring states, and the immense wealth he possessed at that particular time, including all that was contained within his opulent palaces, like the Epang Palace, right? There were so many things inside it. The Epang Palace, right? Yes, the Epang Palace. There was a tremendous amount of wealth inside it. Didn't Shang Yu or someone else burn it down completely later? It supposedly burned for a full 3 months or something like that, didn't it? When the old summer palace was burned, it also burned for that long. Some people say it wasn't just the wealth that was burned. Others say the fire simply didn't go out. There are many explanations. But no matter what, there really was an extraordinary amount of wealth at the time. But in the very end, the ultimate outcome was extremely tragic. All of this profound impermanence, even within a single person's family, can also happen like this. At times when people are especially and intensely envious of you, perhaps overnight or in just a very short period of time, everything could dramatically and completely change, altering your circumstances entirely, becoming totally different from before. So for us as individuals, whether it's the vibrancy and potential of our youth, or perhaps some truly unique and distinctive qualities that we inherently possess, like certain talents or wisdom, ultimately, these will also experience impermanence. And in an entire country, or in the whole world, even the most truly wonderful and beautiful scenes are not exempt from impermanence either. As practitioners, we should always maintain a deep awareness of the concept of impermanence. But this awareness of impermanence is different from pessimism. Pessimism makes vulnerable people feel completely hopeless and totally lose the inner courage to stand up again courageously. But when we truly understand this principle, if it ever happens to us, we will become truly even braver, even more courageous. There is quite a significant difference in this regard. If you have never trained yourself in this aspect, if you have never practiced, then when it finally truly happens to you, you will also be especially truly pitiful. So sometimes we also look at some historical records. I see that some of us also like to read history and like to look at the current situation, the future situation, and the past situation. In the past, those people who were so famous in history, what did they end up becoming? Those who were so wealthy in history, what did they end up like in the end? Some have their famous legendary names historically recorded in our history books, while some don't even have their names mentioned. So, when it comes to the temporary, fleeting, worldly wealth of this world, everyone should have a clear understanding in their hearts. Last year, they were truly like powerful dragon kings, but this current year, most of them have unfortunately fallen among mere beggars, living like beggars. So this isn't exactly a dream in any sense, but it's as if we're really dreaming. Therefore, when it comes to the pleasures of samsara, a sense of renunciation naturally arises. We have to recite it once again, don't we? We really do indeed.
Mertang kalan jatsun nawa jin yarna rangri long chur tsatse zirwa dang rabshung. Lundrat, nanang kludang drawi shikbo parchir, dalo nyamtag rambu jantanan digba, dagor malam manang malam jin nang shir, kuru de la samba wangmentar kevshung. Tombu topche kan la chakchen ji yo te tantan mandag tongki chankar jirpanda, nyangbo me na yarjin jatsun lao shir samjang samna yirchur no majik mannam.
He said last year they were like dragon kings, but this year, because the stock market crashed, they immediately became beggars. There were so many, especially wealthy people, and overnight they entirely lost everything. Some time ago in India, where there were many, many corrupt officials and wealthy people in India, they meticulously piled all of their valuable money up inside their own houses. Later, their leaders came up with a solution. There was really no other way, so in a very short period of time, they changed all the Indian currency. Those corrupt officials didn't dare come forward. They ended up burning all the money. It was truly pitiful. People who originally had a lot of money overnight became just like everyone else. Some really had no other choice, so they distributed the money to the common people. Actually, India handled it quite well this time. Ordinary people could go and exchange the money themselves. And in various banks, there was a lot of money belonging to corrupt officials. Ordinary people and even beggars suddenly became incredibly rich. This, too, is the profound impermanence of life. I met someone who was wealthy and powerful. He could certainly be truly considered a corrupt official. His own father was arrested. His mother passed away because she was in a bad state of mind at the time. He himself used to be a high-ranking official in his department. He held a very important position. Later, for various reasons, he stepped down. After stepping down, he subsequently started doing some small business ventures entirely on his own. He said he didn't know if it was a dream. It felt like in just a short period of time. He said after his father got into trouble, his mother also quickly passed away. Then the attitude of all their relatives and friends completely changed. They used to be so glamorous and high profile. No matter what they ate or wore, everything they possessed was the very best. Countless people used to treat them extremely well, but then overnight it seemed like many people were afraid of being implicated. In the end, he just did some small independent business ventures on his own. Now he can basically make ends meet, comfortably supporting himself. He said, "Now I have a personal understanding of impermanence." Look, it says here, Last year, I was like a king with so much of everything. But later, there was no difference between me and a beggar. This isn't a dream, it's real life. But it's just like dreaming. There's really no difference from a dream. There are many such phenomena in our cycle of rebirth. Whenever I think of these things, if we are especially and deeply attached to the cycle of samsara, then perhaps it's just empty talk. Because that's the nature of things. Everything quickly becomes impermanent. People with money, people with status, people with wealth, including many of us young people who feel things are going well after a few years, will feel disappointed there's nothing to do. No one can stop the relentless passage of time. All high officials and celebrated people. Impermanence is as unstable as fleeting autumn clouds. The summer's vibrant rainbow is but a mere illusion. Pondering deeply increases our aversion. Next, let's talk about high officials, leaders, and those in positions of significant power. Of course, having power makes one quite famous. Those who are famous, powerful, and have status are also impermanent and unstable, just like the clouds in autumn. Why do Buddhist scriptures often mention autumn clouds? And why do the treatises refer to them as well? Because the beautiful autumn clouds float gracefully high up in the clear blue sky. They create a truly picturesque scene. They are especially white, especially beautiful. But if the autumn wind blows them away, they disappear in a very short time. Autumn clouds look especially wonderful, unlike those in spring, which are often very misty and hazy. Definitely not like this at all, indeed. Autumn clouds are especially beautiful, appearing exceptionally lovely. But they all vanish and disappear in a very short period of time. So the status and the fame that we have in this world may indeed seem very appealing, but in reality they are quite unstable. They are impermanent, just like autumn clouds, or they have no real meaning at all. Just like a summer rainbow. The summer rainbow is the same way. When you see it, countless people are taking pictures with their cameras. Wow, this rainbow is so beautiful. Come, there's a rainbow over here. Hurry, take a picture. Bring my phone, bring my iPad. Which one is better? Phone doesn't work. Hurry up and take picture. Really capture the beautiful rainbow. I want to stand right inside the magnificent rainbow and then take a picture of us. Ah, it's gone now. The rainbow has disappeared. People in this world are still very envious of status. But some people, as soon as they actually get it, immediately lose it through an election and it's completely gone. Then they themselves also become very low-key at that time. They have no choice but to keep a very low profile. There's really nothing they can do. In the past, when they went out, so many people would start to, on the left and right, there were always people protecting him. They always treated him with such great respect and diligently served him, always. But in the end, all of that was gone. Everything disappeared. Today it seems like time. Look, let me say a bit more about this. Thinking deeply and profoundly about these significant things truly makes one feel even more profoundly disillusioned. Next, it explicitly says, His Holiness, who is indeed the wish-fulfilling jewel, should have been at that time in his own life circumstances. Talking about maybe leading these people. He said, disturbing the minds of some teachers and monks, and also using certain laws to punish innocent commoners, innocent people, the general populace. Their arrogance is like a poisonous snake. But if these people end up in future lives, they will definitely fall into the 3 lower realms. There is no way out for them. Because in that era, some powerful leaders and many high officials deliberately destroyed religious monasteries and showed no respect to monastics, binding them, criticizing them severely, and imprisoning them unjustly, and seeing all kinds of cruel and inhumane methods to make them suffer immensely. At that time, some members of the public, because of their differing class backgrounds and various other unfortunate circumstances, they were innocently punished and sanctioned by the law, and so on and so forth. These people themselves are like poisonous snakes, never speaking up for others, extremely arrogant. These people may seem to possess status and wealth, but in reality, they are truly very pitiable indeed. So when each and every one of us has status, no matter what kind of position you hold, even if you are indeed just a team leader or something very similar to that, you are still truly a leader. But as a leader, every leader always tends to put on airs, remaining silent and thinking highly of themselves. Actually, this is not really a good thing. We should always try our best, especially as Buddhists. Your current status may not last forever. Therefore, it is important to contemplate the impermanence of all things and consequently do not be arrogant. Finally, let me share another meaningful verse. Today, it is said that here, among the assembled crowd, you may be in a high position, but after you die, when you eventually meet the formidable stern messengers of King Yama, things may not be quite the same. At that particular time, you might be especially very truly pitiful, quietly, humbly running up to slowly kneel before him, and when you are always continuously suffering in the cold, lower realms, unable to ever escape whatever you actually possess right now, be it territory, wealth, or status, none of these will be of any help. This was also something that His Holiness, back in the day, it is possible that he was surrounded by some particularly arrogant individuals. Additionally, during that historical period, there were many powerful figures and groups who occupied and controlled various territories. In every history and every country, there are always such people. In different periods, there are different bad people, different kinds of people. They act out of their own afflictions. Whether we look at any history book, movie, or historical account, we can all see this aspect of human nature. Arrogance, jealousy, ignorance, depending on the collective karma of sentient beings at the time, under different circumstances, these qualities will always stand out. We can also see some of these situations here, some of the circumstances from that time. That's all for our session today. Oh, I haven't recited the remaining last verse yet. It seems like when I recite it this specific way, it's always a bit
톰부 톱지니라 적진지 답든 좀 타르빌람도 라서 망보이 특트 니미 뎀방 첨지 레스낭당 자르테 정은나미 강라 뜨드 랑상 냠비 강라 뜨드 장장 시미람창 점디 진자지 요정 다스타르 데위남 톰토 따르나야 시지포냠 통디 데점지 문자 타르가 소네스 등을 ramnyongdi yirde longshud maya panbana magda sonamde tamse thobani tonani de jana base jirgana jirano chuban jubun zonen droa
Bandangara Badna Sodargye Bandangara Badna Sodargye Bandangara Badna Sodargye